Yeah, I feel I was being torched in the earlier last sessions in the final part. But anyways, it's great to be here with you. And thanks 121 Mining for the invitation. As some of you may know, I have been in the metals and mining industry for the past 7 years before I started doing the corporate strategy with Evonik. Which is specialty chemical companies that supply and doing the partnership with the major industry players, including some of the deep involvement with oil and energy sectors. So hydrogen is actually one of the key sectors that attract our attention. We observe the multiple projects and investment in this sector, and also the government's ambitions and the roadmap for a greener production process, as well as various deployment covering some of the heavy emission demand. It's a topic that covers many areas, but we won't touch all the topics today because we only have half an hour. But I would like to use this session to introduce some of the basic ideas in hydrogen production application, which is commonly known as the supply and demand, as well as its value chain and some of the key technologies. So actually, I would like to start with a concept that I'm sure everyone in this conference room has heard of it in some sort of occasions, which is green steel, as we can see from the slide. The news headlines caught our eyes with iron ore giant invest and doing research on it. As the name indicated, green steel means environmental friendly process. But why miners are doing this and how this being achieved? So first, miners are doing this for their net zero targets for scope 3, which includes the emission from the downstream activities. In this case, as we can see from here, around 98% of FMG's scope 3 emissions are coming from steel making, crude steel production. With the similar motivation, miners, including BHP, also invest to doing research on hydrogen in steel makings, and Rio Tintos are actually doing partnership with Japan's Sumitomo to develop hydrogen as a replacement for gas in alumina refining process. So iron and steel making account for around 8 to 11% of the global CO2 emission, depending how you calculate it. So how to decarbonize it has become an essential topic to achieve net zero. Traditional steel makings use the fossil fuel to create the heat, while the green steel using the renewables to electrolyze water and produce hydrogen. Use hydrogen to make DRI and then to the final products. As some of you have stayed for the earlier Wood Mackenzie's session, you may have known some of the impact to the steel value chain. Not only miners, but also steel makers in Japan and Korea, Europe and US are also eye on this technology and reduce the CO2 emission. So what we just mentioned is just one of the one of the multiple applications of hydrogen. So the key to facilitate this process is affordable and low to zero hydrogen. If you have ever read any news articles or reports on hydrogen, the first thing you may wonder might be why there are so many colors of hydrogens. And as I'm sure, like hydrogen is invincible. So actually, the color associated hydrogen depends on its production method. Green hydrogen represents the production used mostly fossil fuel feedstocks like coal and natural gases, and through the SMR process to produce the hydrogen. During this process, there are actually a significant amount of CO2 emissions. Basically around like 9 to 12 units of CO2 emissions for every unit of the hydrogen produced. So actually to date, still like more than 95% of the world hydrogen are produced is gray, given it's already very mature technology and also it's very economical production cost. So for the blue hydrogen is the hydrogen produced via similar feedstock and gasification process, but they are using the carbon capture, CCUS, to reduce the carbon emissions. It's more expensive, but it's also significantly reduce the carbon emissions compared to the gray process, gray hydrogen. It is a process for industry to transit from the traditional fuel to greener energy. Its carbon intensity is much less than gray, but it's still not neglectable. The hydrogen we focus on today is green hydrogen. So the CO2 emission can be as low as 0, as the hydrogen production only use water as the basis feedstock and using renewable energy to produce hydrogen via electrolysis. However, as you may observe from the slide, the unit cost for green hydrogen is much higher than the other two, but with more capacity to be put in operations, more affordable electrolysis and the renewables to be in the future, the long-term cost can be actually reduced as low as 1.3 USD per kilogram of hydrogen production, which is already comparable to the current gray hydrogen production cost. So now we know what different types of hydrogen are. Let's have a look at more applications of hydrogen. Apart from the potential use of the industry activities such as steel making, refining, hydrogen is traditionally used as a chemical feedstock to produce methanol, ammonia, and other chemical products. Now the government and industry have realized its potentials in the energy transition, including usage in transport, heat, and gray electricities. And these activities are all related to the Scope 1 and 2 emission for transport and industry sectors, and also the Scope 3 emissions for other participants through the value chain. Just for the information, Scope 1 is actually the direct emission from own resources, such as the auto combustion, coal plants burning emission, and the Scope 2 covers indirect emission from the industry's activities using purchased electricity, steam, and heat. So hydrogen fuel use is critical of reducing emissions in the hard-to-decarbonize sectors, in which the direct electrification is difficult to implement. So what we have heard just now is more like the personal auto, so which is easier to use the battery to power. But for example, like having industry activities such as steel manufacturing and large-scale chemical production, having duty road transport, shipping and aviation is very difficult to use battery. And hydrogen is one of the key solutions in development. To quantify the demand of those end-use sectors, let's look at the right-hand side. These two charts are published by IEA, which shows two scenarios of hydrogen demand growth. Announced place scenario are realized, considers all the natural net zero emissions pledged and assume all those government's roadmap plans will be implemented on time. Well, the net zero emission scenarios shows what is needed from the energy sector to reach the net zero CO2 emission by 2050, in line with the Paris Agreement's ambitious target to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 centigrade. So global hydrogen demand was, as you can see from the slide, was around 90 million tons in 2020, and is projected to increase rapidly in the next few decades. In a net zero emission scenario, hydrogen demand is actually forecast to multiply sixfold to reach more than 500 million tons by 2015, with half of the demand in industry and transport. It's a very ambitious goal, I must say. But in the announced fleet scenarios, is lower than the net zero emission scenarios in every way, especially in transportation, power, and thin fuel application. However, this means still the gap between the demand required to achieve net zero and the actual demand in plan. But it's also an implication that as the net zero initiative become more materialized in the next few years, there would be more potential demand generated from the end-use sector. So now we know about the general idea of the hydrogen production and application. Let's take a step back at the broader value chain and major players geographically. We put green hydrogen value chain here as one of the ultimate, as it is one of the ultimate goal for people picturing the energy transition. The value includes renewable electricity generation and electrolyzer for the main reaction of hydrogen production, hydrogen storage, and transportations for both short distance and long haul. Distributions and also distributions to the industry demand centers and for the heating and gas power plants. Each step and applications will involve multiple technological challenges, but also means huge opportunities for solution providers, which we will touch in a few ideas in this session later. If we look at the value chain from the geographical perspective, we will find an interesting fact that the AP actually show a keen interest in hydrogen for energy transition in order to secure its energy supply and decarbonization. And there has been some of the complementary strategic interest in hydrogen across the region. If we look at the left-hand side, we will notice quite a few giga-scaled production projects has been set up in Australia and China, and Japan and Korea. Also, although not as many as we observed in Europe, the two countries has also set up large scales of industry usage in refinery, ammonia, methanol, and so on. And transportation applications such as the hydrogen fuel vehicles is also gaining more support from the government. Investment interest actually is rising from both the government and industry players. And if we look at by country, we will notice countries like China produce most of the green hydrogen at the moment, and its demand is also growing rapidly, and its ambitions to net zero and green hydrogen's production is also solid. Japan and Korea, who is more advanced in deployment and application, including FCEV, is looking for imports of the green hydrogen from resource-abundant providers, such as Australia, who have already signed the MOU with Japan, Korea, and Singapore on hydrogen exporting potentials. So the dynamic with the Asian Pacific also indicates that the hydrogen economy will further boosted by technologies advancement in transportation, such as in shipping and also the gas-grade injection. So as we mentioned about transportation, the low energy density of hydrogen means that it can be really expensive to transport over long distance. However, a number of possible options are available to overcome this hurdle, including compression, liquefaction, or the incorporation of the hydrogen into larger molecules that can be more readily transported as liquids. In many countries, there's an extensive existing natural gas pipeline network that can be also used to transport and distribute hydrogen, just with more affordable tweaks applied on the existing pipeline to separate natural gas and hydrogen. New infrastructure is also doable, but it's more expensive. However, with dedicated pipeline and shipping networks, it will potentially allow a large scale of the overseas hydrogen transport happening. So actually, challenge still remains as some of the existing components along the natural gas value chain have natural gas pipelines have a limited tolerance for hydrogen blending. But with a certain kind of technology, the membrane, mentioned in the slide, it can actually increase the tolerance of the hydrogen density. Currently, the up limit of the mixture of the hydrogen is around 20%, which will minimize the risk of minimize the risk, but also use this application. So if we calculate it, there are actually almost like 3 million kilometers of natural gas transmission pipelines around the world. If some of the infrastructure could be used in transport hydrogen, it actually can provide a major boost to the demand for hydrogen. For example, a blend of 20% of hydrogen in natural gas will boost the global demand for hydrogen to around 80 million tons. In fact, we already heard some of the progress in this aspect. For example, the UK's gas grade will be ready to blend up to 20% of the hydrogen into their gas networks across the country from 2023, which is quite near term, according to the Energy Networks Association in January this year. So here is some key industry players. So please notice the list is not exhaustive. So we can see there are already quite a few well-known companies have set up projects on hydrogen. So we have more understanding in terms of current situation. What is in the future, you may ask? As we mentioned in previous section, we expect to see the flows of green hydrogen from Australia to Japan, Korea, and Singapore. If we zoom out to a global landscape and look at them from a more cost perspective, we will also find something interesting that matches this expectation. The more red the region is, the lower the cost would be, and the more blue is, the more cost the region has to pay for producing 1 unit of green hydrogen in the long term. So we saw several supply and demand centers from the map. As we can observe, the demand center like Southeast Asia, Japan, and Korea will experience much higher production cost given less natural resources are accessible or more expensive renewable technology, which countries like China, Australia, US, and US and South America will see cheaper production cost given its accessibility to abundant natural sources. So let's look at the supply landscape in quantitative way. So in the left-hand side, you can see the historic development of global installed electrolysis capacity in the past 5 years. I hope you still remember the electrolysis is an essential step to produce hydrogen from water. As we observed, Europe has lead growth and Canada and China is catching up. But if we look at the next decade, we will see, based on the project plan, Asia, US, and Europe will see new projects online in the near future. While Europe will be steadily ramping up their projects, Australia will see a huge spike in the electrolysis capacity in the year of 2028. The planned Western green energy hub from Australia will be in gigawatt scale, with a solar PV and wind capacity of up to 50 gigawatt. So it will produce around like 3.5 million tons per annum hydrogen for conversion into around 20 million tons of ammonia for export. So as the average so it means like Australia are really on the way to export to the other regions. And as the average, and also you can see from the white dot, you can see like in before 2025, the average project size is still small, which means there's not much economics of scale. However, as this average project size increases, the economics of scale and also the learning effect are expected to bring down the cost of green hydrogen production. So it's more, it is a more technical slides, but I still would like to show something here because it's really key to the development of hydrogen market. So mature technologies such as the alkaline and PEM account for over 90% of green hydrogen output. But emergent technologies such as the AEM electrolysis have potential to improve the efficiency and lower the capex. Europe is now leading the research. So as you can see from the left-hand side, the left one is most traditional way to produce hydrogen. It's less efficient, but it's very cost-effective, and it's cheaper. However, for example, for the second chart, as we see, which uses proton exchange membrane, it's actually is more efficient than the previous one, and it's also a mature technology. But the solution could be turned to very acid, so we have to use more expensive precious metals to ensure to ensure there's no corrosion happening. However, the AEM and technology are actually a mixture between two technologies, which make the equipment more durable and also lower the price of the capex. So after talking about supply, then let's look at the demand sections. So despite recent strong momentum in deployment in recent years, projects planned indicates that the hydrogen technology application in the demand sector does not really align with the net zero emission scenario ambitions. So currently, the government are focused more on how to decarbonize hydrogen production compared to the stimulate demand for the new application. Apart from apart from some exceptions for deploying FCEVs in China, Korea, Japan, and EU, actually there's few governments target to accelerate the adoption of hydrogen-based fuel in end-use sectors. Some of the reason can be like probably there's more efficient way to use in the automobile, for example, like we mentioned, the battery storage, battery metals, and also the energy storage. So if we read the table on the right-hand side, we will notice actually replacement of gray hydrogen used in refining and industry will generate huge demand for green hydrogen, even like there's not significant absolute demand growth in those sectors. I will also highlight as transportation as is responsible for over 20% of the global GHG emissions and around like 25% of the final energy demand. Hydrogen use in these sectors only represents less than 0.01% of the energy consumed currently, but it's minimum, but it can also offer the emission reduction opportunities, especially in what we mentioned, the hard to electrify transportation segment. And in addition, there's also other applications in the transport sectors, including the heavy off-road applications in mining and agriculture. We have seen the Anglo-America from mining sectors and New Holland from agriculture sector are already put some of these ideas in applications. And also the fall leaves are powered by hydrogen, which I think currently the leaders are the Plunge Power, and also Walmart has applied some of the applications. So here is some of a few tables talking about, we can skim through for the key projects of deployment in these key end-use sectors. We mentioned in the last slide. As you can see, quite a few relevant projects in progress and in plan globally. So this one is the industry one. The transportation one, deployment of the FCEVs. Here come to the end of the session. So just to let everyone can get some concept when you come back home. So I add a few takeaways. So the first one is hydrogen is in transition away from the chemical feedstocks to clean energy solutions for transport, heat, and electricity. And also the green hydrogen to replace gray hydrogen in traditional chemical production and industry activities will generate a huge demand for the green hydrogen and electrolysis process. Also, Asia Pacific will play a key role in the value chain. The supply chain within the Asia Pacific is actually has the real dynamic of import and exporting internally. The next part is it can be very expensive to transport hydrogen over long distance. However, there's a lot of ways to solve this issue. One of the ways is to use the existing natural gas pipeline and use it to transport and distribute hydrogen. And in the next decade, the green hydrogen production growth will be supported by the new capacity ramping up, and as well as the new technologies which can bring down the cost. And also, the production in plan indicates the hydrogen deployment in demand sector does not yet align with the net zero emission scenarios ambitions. And most of the government are focusing on the lower the production cost and optimize the production process rather than stimulating demand. But there's also the potential of unleashed demand. The final point is, as the average project sizes increases, actually the green hydrogen's production cost it has potential to be brought down significantly, which will help is for further expansion in production and will stimulate its demand as prices drop. So thank you. Oh, okay.
I'm just trying to understand, because the energy content for hydrogen is smaller than the energy content for natural gas. Am I correct? Like you have 3 units of natural gas to produce 1 unit of hydrogen energy, right? So other than its storage capabilities, and to some extent, like you say, using the natural gas grids transportation, why would it be economical to actually produce hydrogen from, say, a water source, or even convert natural gas to hydrogen? I just don't understand the economic case now, because if you already have natural gas, it's already going to generate carbon anyway, right? So to convert natural gas to hydrogen just doesn't make sense. If you're doing renewables to hydrogen, fine, but even that the amount of solar energy that you have to use is really, really large. So yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, I understand. So just for your information, hydrogen can be used as energy, one of the energy sources, and this one is more, if we look at the future, is the source of energy. But currently, we still need hydrogen used in, like, for example, refining and industrial usage.
Industrial uses, yes.
Yeah.
So in terms of energy source?
Yes, so it's more like in the longer term, because if like the renewables price has dropped down, and hydrogen is like more, how do you say, like you can use it for like heating. Like, for example, if you mix the natural gas and hydrogen together, you can use in heat, and you can use in aviation, shipping, which is not really like, for example, like if you have to use oil and natural gas in the shipping and aviation, there's carbon emission there, right?
Okay, fine.
Yeah. So it's more for.
But it takes so much energy to electrolyze it, isn't it? From natural gas to hydrogen, it takes a lot of energy as well.
Yes. So it's not. So as you see, it's not the mature technology at the moment, because if you use, for example, the fossil fuel electricity to do that really, yeah, that's true. So for now, the hydrogen production and hydrogen demand is actually used in the chemical sector, but that creates a lot of carbon emission already, because you need to use the electricity powered from